Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on the Magic and Love in YA Lit panel. My name is Allison Tran. I'm the Library Services Manager at Irvine Public Library in Irvine, California, and I'm so excited to be moderating this session. I was a YA librarian for many years earlier in my career, and it always feels like coming home to get to talk about YA Lit. And there's so much richness in the books we're going to discuss today, these fantasy worlds that our authors have created. So I'm just super excited. So without further ado, please help me welcome Melissa de la Cruz, author of Sibylline, published by Penguin Young Readers, Angela Montoya, author of Carnival Fantastico, published by Random House Children's Books, Clíodhna O'Sullivan with her Hidden Fire from Penguin Young Readers, and Amelie Wen Zhao, author of The Dragon and the Sun Lotus from Random House Children's Books. Thank you all for being here. So excited to have you all with us today. And we've got so many great participants who are eager to hear about your books. So the way this session is going to work is I'm going to kick it off with like kind of a roundtable question for all of you, where I'm going to ask you to introduce your books briefly to our audience. And then I'll switch to individual questions for all of our authors. And audience members, as we're talking, please leave your questions in the Q&A. We would love to answer them if our authors end up having time at the end of the panel. So thanks for being with us here today, everyone. So I'm just going to call on the authors in the order I see them on my screen right now. Melissa, could you kick it off and tell us about Sibylline?
Sure. It is about three best friends who do not get into the magical Ivy League university of their choice. So they decide to steal an education instead and work in the university and try to learn magic that way. And in doing so, find some pretty dark secrets about the school that they've been trying to get into.
Ugh, we love a dark magical school, and I think probably a lot of teen readers can relate to that pressure of trying to get into their dream school. So it's great. Cleona, how about her hidden fire? Tell us a little about it.
Okay, so this is easily the scariest part of the whole panel for me because doing something like an elevator pitch sounds dangerously close to bragging, which is an Irish person. We're all supposed to be like super self-deprecating, so I'm really bad at this. But effectively, her hidden fire is a romantasy. It's inspired in part by kind of Irish language and Irish landscape. And the lovely marketing people, so I'll say it's them, they have described it as searing and sexy. And if you've ever been exploited to the point of burnout in your job, I hope it makes you feel a little bit seen. Um,
Oh,
the so the central character, Aya, basically she discovers that she has this coveted gift, so the ability to channel power, but it's her best friend Yonon, is who she's in love with, who desperately needs to have that power if his family is to keep their home and their titles. So at the kind of moment of reckoning, when she sees that he's about to fail his magic test, she secretly gives him her power so that he's the one that everyone thinks is gifted. And they go away to the island of Lambay, but everyone thinks that she has a lesser power. And when she gets there, she meets the mysterious Scry, who is far too perceptive, given that she's kind of desperately trying to keep the secret of the fact that she's supplying power to Yunon and that he isn't gifted. I suppose the magic sort of starts out as something that's seen as rather wonderful, but then it gets a whole lot darker when we realize that the masters are creating their magic by drawing on the life force of ordinary people. And it's very much kind of meant to try and do that thing which I think fantasy can do so wonderfully, which is kind of be a bit of an allegory for our own kind of extractive society, where like the lifestyles of like a tiny few people is enabled by exploiting ordinary people.
there's always those layers in fantasy. That's what's
Yeah.
makes it such a rich reading experience. It's not just the magic or the dragons or the fairies. It's
Yeah.
real life too. So Angela, tell us about Carnival Fantastico.
Yeah, I'm here to brag all about myself, to brag about my book. I am ready for it. No, I'm just kidding. I can't even remember what this book's about, but I'm gonna try my best. This is Carnival Fantastico. It is my third young adult romantasy, and it follows Esmeralda, who is an ex-thief and spy, and she's on the run from the commander of the king's army. And so the only place that she finds as a safe haven is Carnival Fantastico, which is a magical traveling carnival. And it is a safe haven for thieves and criminals and misfits. And the only problem is when you go as a carnival hand or as a performer, you can only stay there for 1 year unless you are the lead act. So Esmeralda's year is almost up, and she's determined to become this lead act to stay safe. And she'll do whatever it takes, including teaming up with the boy who broke her heart. It's mayhem, it's chaos, it's swoony, it's childhood sweethearts, it's the sweetest thing, all wrapped up in a chaotic, beautiful book.
Oh, yeah, it's so much fun. The stakes are so high in these books. I love it. Um, Amelie, how about The Dragon and the Sun Lotus? Please introduce it.
I am so excited to show off, first of all, these gorgeous covers. Thank you for the cover artists and designers. The Dragon and the Sun Lotus is the sequel to The Scorpion and the Night Blossom. These are young adult romantices. And the first book is set in a world where the mortal realm is being ravaged by blood-sucking and soul-sucking demons. One mortal girl who is trying to save her mother's life has to journey to the fairy tale immortal realms in the literally in the skies, like in the clouds. And so she has to attend a set of magic and deadly trials to try to gain a pill of immortality that'll save her mom's life. And along the way, she meets a very handsome and secretive rival who may or may not be on playing for a different team, as well as a guard with a hidden identity. And she finds that she has to kind of pick between them. And in The Dragon and the Sun Lotus, the stakes have escalated. Annie has saved her mother, but the realms are all falling. The demons have invaded the um, infallible immortal realm, and she has to partner with the guard, the handsome guard, to be able to save the kingdoms. And she might have to defeat the demon rival that she was in love with in the first book in order to save her world. So a lot of angst, a lot of yearning, a lot of enemy to lovers, and a lot of nice Chinese high fantasy aesthetics all in this book.
Ugh, I love it. These books are all so fun, and I love that so often the character, like the main character, is just like, oh, they have to work with this amazingly alluring, maybe an enemy, like a little mysterious, like, oh, wow. That's my favorite. Why has that never happened in my job? Okay, so now I have individual questions for y'all. Melissa, Sibylline introduces us to this fantastic trio of main characters that you mentioned, with the story alternating between all three points of view. So, talk to us about developing these three characters, their dynamic, their individual voices, because you have those 3 points of view, and their magical abilities. And I'd love to hear which of their magical abilities you would want to have.
Sure. So in Sibylline, there are three best friends, and I think I was inspired because I am in a lot of terrible trio groups. I don't know why. Three is the magic number. Somehow it's fun to have two best friends. I don't know. It's never quite, and but it's not unhealthy. It's always kind of fun. At least my trios are. And so I wanted to write about that kind of dynamic. And Raven is speaks a lot of languages, like she can understand anything people are saying. Dorian can touch objects and know their past, and then Atticus has, like, kind of can kind of read minds a little bit, but somehow not his friends' minds. So I think I would like to have Raven's ability, because I think that would be really cool. While I speak Tagalog and English, I was just talking to you about our high school French. I never quite did better in French than the
Right.
high school level, and I think I would like that. I think it was important to have them be very separate and distinct, and Raven kind of comes from a rich family. She's a little bit wealthier, has a background that's a lot more privileged. And so she comes, they kind of see her a little bit of a spoiled brat. And Dorian's family, kind of has fallen on hard times, but they have like kind of like heirlooms, which are really important to them. And then Atticus's family, they're kind of just more middle class, like his mom's an architect, but he still grew up, not as privileged as Raven, I would say. So, but there are three of them are kind of overachievers. They're kind of the kids who want to go, to the magical Harvard, let's say, so. And then like a lot of kids these days don't get into their dream school, are rejected. And what do they do after that? How do they handle that? So that was kind of the inspiration. My daughter was going through the college application process when I was writing the book. So that was
That
an
makes so
inspiration.
much sense. I've got a high school junior, so I'm about to launch
Oh,
into
good
that world
luck.
of stress. And yeah, it's so yeah, immediately I was like, oh, this all feels like somehow relatable. Oh my goodness. All right. So my next question is for Angela. Angela, I absolutely fell in love with your two main characters and their tumultuous romance in Carnival Fantastico. So, what are some of your favorite things about writing a love story, and how do you build and sustain that tension on the page? Because it kept me reading.
Oh, yay. Thank you. I appreciate that. I think for me, I just love romance and anything. Even if it's a murder mystery, I'm always searching for the romance, like, and anyway, in the most inappropriate shows. I'm waiting. So for me, it's like I love it so much. So that's automatically what I'm trying to build in my own stories. And so my favorite thing when it comes to writing with these two in particular, I really wanted to make it feel grounded and make it feel heartbreaking and heart-wrenching at the same time. And so I had just read, or not just read, but I have reread The Divine Rivals. And I loved the magic of the notes that were passed between the characters. And so I was like, okay, that's what I want in my own story. I want that like magic of of letters. And so I built into the story these letters that they shared between each other as children, and that they kind of grown and changed into just friendly letters or sarcastic letters into letters where they declare their love for each other. And so that all happens sort of before the story even begins. And so I got to, which was really fun, add those letters between chapters, and we get this like glimpse into their love story, into their childhood even before their story begins. And so I built that up, and then I broke it. And then of course, like I tore them apart. And so we meet them after the big mess of a breakup, after this huge miscommunication, these lies that were told. And so we get to meet them as not a couple, but as two people that very much hold a lot of bitterness, hold a lot of hatred, hold a lot of hurt. And so that automatically built this tension in. And it was really, really fun to write the banter between them back and forth. And I love a sarcastic female main character. I love a girl that can just tear the boy that she secretly somehow still loves apart. And so it was really fun to build that as they got to meet each other again. And he's such a stoic, sweet young man. And so it's fun to see him have to, how to figure out how to handle her, which I also love. And so as the story built and as things, maybe the miscommunications started slowly breaking and they kind of were like, wait a minute, then I would throw something new in, where maybe the king is there, or not the king, but the commander that is after them is there. And so now it's a new thing that they're having to work through on top of all these messy emotions and feelings. So I just had so much fun just putting these kids through the worst circumstances and watching them thrive above it. So yeah, I built the romance, I broke it, and then I made sure that they somehow tried to find their way back to each other because they were also really, really good friends first. And so I just have it all tangled and braided and messy, and that's how I built that tension, and it was a blast.
Oh, that sounds like so much fun to develop and yeah, the specific beats of like here's where they were when they were younger and here's where they are now and how fun. And the letters, it's kind of like hopefully today's teens with like text messaging, I guess. I don't know, can it be as magical? I hope.
Let's
I
hope.
remember waiting for some exciting emails when I was younger, so you know. We have that at every era, right?
Exactly.
So, Cleona, Her Hidden Fire is your debut novel. Congratulations! Can you
Thank
tell
you.
us a little bit about your publishing journey and how this novel came to be?
Sure, yeah. I was actually thinking, kind of given our audience, that it would be very remiss of me not to acknowledge the very big role that librarians actually played in my publishing journey. Because so I grew up in rural Ireland. It was very isolated. My dad was addicted to alcohol and gambling, and he was away all the time. So there wasn't much in the way of books in the house. But what there was a mobile library bus that used to come to the village that was about a mile away from where we lived. It used to come every 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks I would head down with my bag of books and I would swap it out for another bag of books. And that's how basically I got to read. And in that kind of classically kind of underfunded public services kind of way, it kind of had like the older classics. So it meant I got to read like T.H. White and C.S. Lewis and, just really kind of get a good grounding in kind of fantasy stories and so on. So kind of from then on, I kind of knew that A, I would like to write a story, and B, it was going to be a fantasy story. But kind of if you, and I'm sure you've heard this many times from many authors, but if you kind of come from like a poor background, especially if there's like addiction and poverty and stuff, you don't think that writing is something that's like in your future, because you have to be sensible and you have to get a good job and you have to do all these things. And but always in the back of my head, I was kind of, thinking, okay, someday things will calm down enough that I will start writing. And then I had this kind of like ridiculous year where basically my youngest son contracted meningitis when he was born and ended up in a coma in intensive care for several weeks. A few months later, my mum died suddenly. And then a couple of weeks after that, the company where I was working was sold and I was made redundant. So I found myself sitting at home, unemployed for the first time in my life, with a baby we were very worried about and dealing with kind of complicated grief and kind of going, okay, this is ridiculous. My life can't just be like reacting to all the hits that, because sometimes life does just kind of, hit you one thing after another. And I sort of needed to prove to myself that I kind of had the agency to try and create something even in the middle of all that. So instead of kind of waiting for that perfect moment to start writing, I just said, okay, if like Ursula Le Guin and The Farthest Shore could, take me away from my parents tearing strips out of each other, maybe I could try and, write a book now. And so that's how like I kind of sat down to kind of write the first draft of what is now Her Hidden Fire. Just very quickly, like I wrote it. I wasn't sure if it was a real book, so I sent it to like a manuscript reviewer. He sent it off to his agent without telling me. So I actually very quickly got an agent, and it went out on submission. But it was very raw, and everyone, the whole publishing industry was kind of saying, we're so over dystopias, so go away. So I didn't, it didn't sell, and my agent left agenting. So kind of like snakes and ladders, I kind of, went from having an agent and a book out on submission to having zip. I went to someone else and kind of said, listen, I still believe in the story. Can you tell me, why didn't it sell, or what do I need to do? And she kind of came back to me and she said, listen, you kind of need to work on the relationships and the human element. And the thing is that kind of partly because I'm autistic and partly because I was bullied a lot as a kid and always been told that I said the wrong things and didn't never understood what I was not supposed to say, I kind of had it in my head that I was bad at like human stuff and communications. So I'd written this draft of a book that was all like landscapes and wonder and magic, but like the relationships were just very thin, because I was just scared to do it. But then when you have someone sort of say to you, it's a good book, but you need to make people care, that kind of gave me the courage to actually start trying to do things like dialogue and build the relationship and build the love and so on. So I rewrote it. didn't fancy going into the slush pile, so I sent it to like little small publishers who will, look at you without an agent, and it got taken on by a small publisher. We all worked on it together for a year. It was great. And then the little publisher went bust on publication day. So I had a warehouse full of my book. So I had an agent, lost an agent, had a publisher, lost a publisher. And the worst thing was that I'd actually started writing book two because it was a two-book deal. So actually, one of the weirdest things I did that I still can't quite understand why I did it is I kept going with book two, even though my publisher had gone bust, because it was kind of like book two deserved to come to life. Like in my head, it was a real thing. So I wrote book two, and I went back to my friend and said, "Will you be my agent?" Because I still believe in it. We'll give it one more try. And she said, "No, I won't be your agent." And then a few months later, she said, "Well, all right, actually, I will be your agent." And she kind of set up an agency just for me. And she sent it out on submission, and that's when Penguin came in, and that's it. So I'll stop talking now, but yeah, so that's how it ended up
Wow.
finally getting a publishing deal. Yeah.
That's an incredible story of persistence and resilience and pivoting. Wow, okay. Like may we all carry that energy with us, and I hope that everything got better after that really, really hard time that spurred you into writing this. But
Yeah, it
like,
did. Yeah,
wow, that I mean that's incredible. Thank you for sharing that.
no
That's
problem.
I feel like I need to go do something or fix something now in my life. But also though, the power of having someone who really gave you meaningful and helpful feedback though, that
Oh,
and that you
absolutely. Yeah.
were able to ask the question of like why didn't it sell and really take that feedback. I think that's
Yeah.
a really important step to recognize that you were willing to be open to like, okay, what's going on? What do I need to pivot to? So, thank you for sharing that.
No problem.
All right. Well, Amelie, so one of the most striking aspects of the dragon and the sun lotus is this rich, lush world building, which is something you're known for as an author. So tell us about developing this beautiful Chinese-inspired fantasy settings, and what does it mean to you to bring your heritage to the fantasy genre?
I love this question. I feel like I could talk about world building forever, and it's one of my favorite aspects in reading books, especially from different cultures and backgrounds and corners of our world. Growing up, I also librarians were also super pivotal to my writing journey. I grew up in China where we didn't have a lot of English books back then, but there was a section in my library. And I would always go and literally learn to read English there. I would look up like every word in the dictionary until I got a lot better and I was reading like thicker and thicker books. But a lot of those brought me to different worlds that I hadn't seen before. Like I learned about like wizards and witches and like Western dragons versus like our Chinese dragons. So these were all windows of escapism and just really helped my imagination. And so in writing stories from my heritage, I want to bring the same kind of feeling to anybody who's looking to dive into a new world, or maybe someone who shares my heritage and wants to learn more about it, or just wants to escape back to somewhere that feels more like home or a comfort read. So world building with this series was honestly my most indulgent yet. It's such a tribute to all of the Chinese high fantasy dramas that I grew up reading and watching. Um, I frequently attribute all of my like Chinese world building and imagination to my grandma's house. She lived in one of those like older Chinese courtyard houses that are rare now, as they're being all kind of renovated. But there were so many like I thought of them as like magical artifacts, like little treasure chests of like jade amulets and like wooden sculptures of things and like dried flowers and like some like I forget what they're called, but the like not phoenixes, peacock like feathers and everything. So as a kid, like you don't have internet there and you're bored out of your mind, so you just scamper around and look and make up magic out of those. And so a lot of those objects made their way into the Scorpion Night Blossom and the Dragon and the Sun Lotus, including a magical jade amulet that connects our protagonist with a mysterious someone. And then in constructing the worlds, I really tried to pay homage to the Chinese high fantasy structure of there being a mortal realm, an immortal realm somewhere in the skies that's beautiful and perfection, and then the evil demon realm. But honestly, with the demon realm, I was like, I'm going to try to make this also fun and kind of sexy. And I just injected like flower magic and like butterflies and like beautiful feathers, and made it like kind of an eerie-esque but beautiful place as well. Because the whole point of these is to try to kind of humanize the other. Um, and um, and yeah, so I remember my editor being like, "What are the flowers for in the magic? Like, what r role do they play?" And I was like, "They're aesthetics, they're vibes. We don't need a reason for them." Um, so it's yeah, this was one of my most indulgent worlds yet. And it felt like an escape for me. And I hope readers feel the same.
Oh, I think so. I love that you describe it as indulgent, because I think sometimes we just really want to enter the world of a book and escape everything else, and it's just so delightful to dive in, and the fantasy structure you described as well is so interesting too, because as you said, it'll feel like home for many readers and then an amazing window for other readers, and it's just books are magical, aren't they? Wow, I love this. I'm going to circle back to Melissa. So, you have been a absolute rock star author for over 2 decades now, writing YA and middle grade bestsellers featuring vampires, witches, villains, and now with Sibylline, dark academia vibes. So I'm really curious to know what keeps you coming back to writing for a young adult audience, and what kind of changes you've seen in the publishing landscape over the years.
I love writing for teenagers. I was a journalist, and then my first book was an adult book. And my editor actually was the one who said, there's this new kind of genre called YA, and I think your voice would really lend itself to that. And I'd never really thought about it, but when I started writing my first YA book, I thought, oh my God, I'm really, this is my voice. I don't think I've ever grown up from being 14. I think, it's your kind of writer personality kind of sets at a certain point. So I think I'm 11 because I write for middle grade. So I can really channel my 11-year-old self. And I'm also very much 14. And, I just love it. I think it's a universal thing. People always remember their teenage years. I mean, I don't think I could tell you what I did at 28, but I can tell you those 14 to 18, like I remember those years so well. And how it's changed, it's interesting because when I started out, there was like maybe one bookshelf in like bookcase in the stores, which was YA. So you really only had like this tiny little space in the bookstores. And then it kind of exploded with Harry Potter and Twilight. It really brought a whole generation of readers who loved books. And that lasted for quite a long time. And and then it's ended. Sadly, something that we've been worried about in publishing for so long was just losing readers. I remember that was always something we were worried about. Actually, kind of terribly happened during COVID. I think during the first part of the pandemic, everybody was so excited. Oh, people are reading books. But really what we're seeing is the kids, who were reading for pleasure, went from, already a low number, 30% to
Mm.
10%. So I think we're really fighting that, and we're fighting the phones. I think the phones and social media is such a huge part of losing readers. And I'm glad to see, kind of we're all waking up now to see how terrible all this screen time is on developing brains. And even my daughter recently stopped. She literally just gave up her iPhone and said, "I bought a flip phone." So there's a
Wow.
lot of kids kind of waking up to seeing how bad it is, and they're taking it into their own hands. And I'm kind of hoping. And we didn't know, our kid was like 2 years old, and everybody had an iPad, and you give them the iPad, and it seems like this really innocuous, just another plaything. But then it kind of took over. I'm sorry, I've gotten this rant. I'm a parent rant now. But but that's what, I do think it's more important than ever to encourage kids to read and to encourage kids to read fun books, entertaining books, reluctant readers. I've never been ashamed of being that author. Like I'm the gateway book. I'm like the fun book that you read. And then hopefully at some point you read, harder and more dense books and, your critical thinking skills, kick in. So,
That's
so
such a funny assessment of your own work. I mean, no, like your work is very thought-provoking as well, but it should be fun. Reading should be fun, and that's what we librarians are all about. Like just read. We're not demanding that readers read some, classic or
yeah.
esteemed literature in whatever way you want to describe that. Like what does it mean, right? We just want people to develop that love of reading. And I think all the books we're talking about here today play a role in that. And this is so interesting about, what the pandemic and the screens and like our attention spans are shorter. It's interesting. Books got really long. Like with
Mm.
Harry Potter and Twilight was pretty long as well. Are you seeing like the demand for shorter books, or are books still you see like you have the freedom to write like a long book, or what's that look like?
I think you do have the freedom to write a long book, always, but I do see, because of this kind of gap in the reading, like publishers are asking for shorter books for, and kind of going back to classic middle grade, classic
Mhm.
YA. YA became so much older, it's like YA 16 plus, 18 plus. I'm like, isn't that adult at that point? So, we
Yeah.
are looking to, to me, YA and why I thrived in it, it was really like the 11, 12, 13-year-old, you're just starting to get into books. You're starting to get more complex stories. But yeah, I think shorter books are a little bit more okay now. I think that there was a one point when everybody thought you had to have like this huge tome, but now, they're okay with like shorter books for sure.
It's actually nice to have that variety because, yeah, not every reader wants to read a super long book, and then some readers will only read a super long book. So, yeah, let's have something for everyone. I love that. Well, I think despite the changes in readership, authors like yourselves will always be creating incredible stories, and the publishers will hopefully be publishing them, and, where we can all win at that point. So, um, it'll be interesting to see what the next decades hold. So, my next question is for Angela. The setting of Carnival Fantastico may seem long ago and far away, kind of early 20th century, but this one quote, as I was reading, jumped out at me as incredibly timely. And it was, "The truth doesn't matter. People are going to believe what they want to believe." I was like, oh, hello. That says a lot today. So, you've woven really thought-provoking commentary about politics and society into this fantasy setting. What are you hoping your young readers will take away from this novel in terms of all of that sort of society commentary?
Yeah, thank you for even mentioning that and for seeing it, to be honest, because it was very purposeful. I did want to add that commentary into this story in particular. And I think in every story I've written so far, there's some sort of commentary on the way I see the world. Um, and so you mentioned it even earlier, Allison, how it's so beautiful about fantasy that you can sort of bring and talk about politics and talk about the world as we see it, but because it's in a fantasy setting, it's a little bit different. We're seeing it in a little bit different, where it's not me, but it's this world. And so I really love romantasy, fantasy in particular, because we do get to talk about these deeper themes, but we're just scratching at it, and it's like a little bit softer of a land, I think, especially for young adult readers. And so that's really what I wanted to explore with this story. And like I said, it was purposeful. I just think of myself as a teen, and even coming into like the age of social media, how I saw the world was so different. I just believed what the adults in my life were saying. I believed what I saw on the news or saw on the TV. I just took it for what it was. And now, we're seeing the world in a different lens. We're seeing the world as it really and truly is, because of social media, even though obviously it's bad and good. But we're seeing a lot of truths sort of come out and be exposed. And so it's like you have to have this moment of like, okay, now that I actually know how am I supposed to feel about this? How am I supposed to go on? Like, am I supposed to change the way I've thought about the adults in my life, the world, the government, all the things? Like, what am I supposed to do with this? And so really this book was kind of my own exploration of like, okay, I'm seeing the truth. What do I do with this? And for these characters, it was a switch of I'm not going to continue on with what these adults are doing. I'm not going to accept these lies and the terrors that they're inflicting. I'm not going to be okay with it. And so we see sort of the ramifications for Ignacio, who is the male lead in this story, where it's literally life-changing for him. And he has to stand up to the main adult in his life, which is his father. So I wanted to add all that in while also in a fantastical carnival, so it's like this big mix, but I think that's also real life too, where we're dealing with these heavy thoughts and emotions and experiences while also I have to go to school and I have to, or I get to go to the movies. And so you're like, it's just this, again, this mix of heavy and light and fun and fear. And so, but when it's in this fantastical world, you kind of get to explore it um, a little softer, like I mentioned, where it's not like, oh, this is me, me, me. It's like it's happening to these characters. I wonder what they're going to do with it. So yeah, I'm so glad that you brought that up because it was really one of the key things I wanted to add into this story. It didn't have to have this war happening beyond the carnival, but I wanted to make sure to put that in there because it was something that was heavy on my mind looking at our world. So yeah, so that's why I put it in there. And again, thank you for asking about it because it was all very purposeful.
Oh, that's amazing. And all of this really makes me think about how lucky these teens are to get to read books like yours, on by which I mean all of you, that you're exploring these really complex topics that do relate to our world in these fantasy lenses. And I feel like looking back at my own teen years, the books that had like political themes were like Animal Farm and 1984 for me, like that I was assigned to read. And I mean, those are incredible works, but as, like a 14, 15-year-old girl, I didn't see myself in them at all. It wasn't like relatable. And so I love that now today's teens can have these complex themes and, thinking about how it relates to their world through a relatable lens and a fun lens too. We librarians know that you learn more when you are having fun. So thank you all authors for this. My next question is for Cleona. I'm fascinated by your representation of power dynamics in Her Hidden Fire. So speaking of really complex themes, your main character is very powerful, but as you mentioned, for various reasons, she's compelled to hide her innate talents. And this is again something I think a lot of as probably especially female readers can relate to, being told to hide your true power. So can you talk to us a little bit about what drew you to explore the concept of hierarchies and claiming one's power through the lens of this book?
Yeah, so I suppose I think when you go to write a book, like you need a certain amount of energy. And for me, I think it means that you're answering a question that you're interested in yourself. Like you're you're writing the book to answer a question or something that's kind of niggling at you yourself. So, and for me, it was exactly that, like that of kind of power and hierarchies and dynamics and what do you show and what don't you show and all that sort of thing. And it would, again, being a bit sort of autobiographical about it, but so when I came to the end of secondary school, I wasn't able to go to college, so I had a place to study medicine, but I had to give it up because of my dad's gambling debt, so we couldn't afford to go to college. So I ended up working just like a load of jobs when I was like 16, 17, 18 to kind of earn the money to put myself through college. So I was like worked as a fruit picker, I was working in factories, I was a singer, I was a boat hand, like I did like a load of jobs. And one of the things that really came through was just that kind of realization that like the say like the richest family in my local town, and people sort of saw them as this like elite, but really all they were good at was hiring loads of vulnerable, poor young people like me and sending us out to pick strawberries for like £1 an hour. Like, it wasn't, there was no like secret sauce. It was just literally just exploitation and like just that kind of extraction economy. So, and then like I go on ahead, like fast forward a few years, and I kind of put myself through and I do law because I think law is the sensible thing to do coming where I'm from. And then I'm back working 17 hours a day in this like city law firm in London, and I'm writing speeches for this partner who literally spends his day in the gym. And then I'd come in the morning and there'd be a post-it note saying, write the speech for the American Bar Association tonight. And then he'd give the speech, and you're just like this completely invisible person who's done all the work, and he just turns up and does it. So just that idea of like the extraction economy where you have this elite kind of parading around at the top as if they're like superhuman, but really it's just there's a whole army of people underneath who are completely invisible that are doing all the work. So I always knew that like when I went to write a book, it was always going to be about like that kind of extraction economy structure and passing yourself off as elite and special when really it's just boring old exploitation. So that and I think almost like because I'd agree with everything that Angela was saying earlier on, but also I think the flip works as well, which is that like if you in your fantasy world carry in something that feels very familiar from our real world, I think it can make your fantasy world feel more relatable or something that you can connect to more quickly. Do you know the way? So it's sort of two things at once. It's like fantasy is this lovely oblique way of dealing with real issues, but bringing in real issues makes the fantasy world feel more grounded. And it makes it was easier for me like to make up the rules of my fantasy world because I knew what I was basing it on, like from real life. And then I suppose just as a final point, I suppose like the fundamental question I was asking myself was kind of like in my head, I was kind of saying that there in this world there are the givers. So there are people like nurses and teachers and librarians who just give of themselves to try and make the world slightly better. And then there's takers. Okay, so people who will exploit and use it and puff themselves up and as if they're the big man, but really they're just taking and taking. And the question I had for myself, and I didn't know the answer when I set out to write the book, was like, can a giver like Aya, who just gives of herself to help her friend, can a giver like Aya ever like win out in a world that's full of takers like the masters who are just exploiting people and as a consequence are puffed up with the power of loads of people, where she's just one person with her own heart.
Oh, there's so much to explore there. I love that kind of interrelationship of reality and fantasy and how you really need both in a fantasy book. The genre is fantasy, but you can't do it without those levels of reality. Because yeah, if it's completely divorced from reality and the real issues that we all deal with and face, or even just hear about, then it's not going to be as meaningful. So I think fantasy readers in the audience are just like nodding emphatically, like eating this up because it's all so true. So Amelie, um, the Dragon and the Sun Lotus is a sequel to The Scorpion and the Night Blossom, completing a duology. And I just realized my high school French totally came out Amelie. I'm so sorry. We were just talking before this session about our ridiculous high school French tendencies. And yeah, somehow that popped out. So I apologize, Amelie. Um, when you come up with a book idea, do you naturally find yourself organizing the story beats into separate books? So, what's your process for developing a story concept into two books or three books, into a series? How do you find those beats and separate them out?
I love that this question kind of combines the business of publishing with craft. Because when you set out to write a book, right, you might not necessarily know if it's going to be 3 books or 2 books or a standalone, and that depends on the publisher, a lot of it. Luckily, I've had a vision for all of my series so far. I've known that the first was going to be 3 books, and then my next two, these two, have been duologies. Also looking at the market, I think duologies are popular and standalones are also very popular right now. So in knowing that and in building out the concept and the plot, I think of the second book as kind of 4 parts in this way. Character, plot, world building, and for this romantasy series, romance. And they have to continue the threads that you've built in the first book while being their own arcs separately, but also taking on the bigger story into a satisfying conclusion. Because when you're writing the first, you're resolving most of the issues, but then you're blowing things up and maybe creating new issues for the second book. So with the Scorpion and the Night Blossom, the romance was primarily with one of the 2 suitors, we'll call them. And that I'm trying to not to give away any spoilers, but so that came to whatever the ending was. And then the key plot and character driven arc of An Ying looking for the immortality pill to save her mom's life was resolved. But now you have this bigger issue of the demon realm is invading not only the mortal realm, but also the immortal realm, which was supposed to be like infallible, essentially. And all of these the romance, everything has to complement that key plot arrow to draw to a conclusion. So we have An Ying choosing between the destiny that she's been following in her family's footsteps of taking care of her family versus if she could go on to save the realms and become something bigger. Is she going to choose that, or is she going to go back to her original wish? And how does she evolve with the plot and with the romances throughout? We also have the 2 romances and which one she's going to choose. And that is, again, ties back to her own character arc in how she chooses, the 2 are symbols of different ideals and destinies for her. And so that, but also how do you weave in enough conflict so that there's plot level conflict, there's internal character conflict, and then there's romance level conflict. And then number 4, world building. How do you make this world even bigger? So in the first book, the mortal realm and the immortal realm were introduced. In the second book, the demon realm comes in. We get a hint of why these demons are looking to cross over into all these demon realms, and there's a compelling reason behind that. So it's really about going, I think, bigger, escalating the stakes, and continuing those threads from the first book to build the conclusion to the entire duology, as well as the second book as its own arc. I will say, I think this book has my favorite ever ending that I've written. It's one where I'll go back and read it. I usually I think authors will not like to go back and read our own writing. We're like, oh my gosh, like I could have done this so much better, but I'll go back and read it and I'll be like, okay, this is the favorite. So I'm excited for readers to experience this one.
Oh, that is lovely. And I love this complicated building of this story structure. So, is it safe to say you are an outliner? Like, do you make complex outlines before you begin?
I'm both. I think when you're signing a book contract with a publisher, they do ask for a rough outline. But I will follow the outline, but I think of the outline as like a map to a new world I'm exploring. Like I know the path, but if I see something really beautiful off to the side, like a new idea takes me or something even better than the outline, I'm really open to going in that direction and exploring. Not all of my outlines, like all of my books have ended as I'd planned them. I've never had a different ending than I'd planned. But I would also be open to that if it's a much better conclusion, that just comes as I'm writing it.
Oh, so cool. Well, sadly, we have come to the end of our session. Our time is up. which I had so many more questions for all of you. But I want to close out by grabbing something from the chat. So our audience members have been weighing in a little bit, and Marilyn Taniguchi had a wonderful comment. She said all of these authors have used myth, folklore, and traditional ideas of fantasy and combined real life issues to develop engaging, relatable stories for teens and adults. Can't wait to read more. And Marilyn, shout out to you because thank you. That is a fantastic way to cap this session. Thank you, authors. Your books are so beautiful, so enticing, so addictive. I know readers are just absolutely going to be glued to the pages. And I'm so excited to see these on the shelves of my own library and others. So thank you for your time today. Audience members, thank you for being with us today. Thanks to all the librarians and educators. Big thanks to Penguin Random House for hosting this incredible event. And next, there are 2 concurrent panels, First Time Fiction and Risky and Vulnerable Nonfiction. So I hope everyone has a great rest of their day. Thank you all. Thank you, authors. Thank you, audience.
Thanks very much, Allison. That was great. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Allison.
Take care.